We're less than a month away from the premiere of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the new DCEU superhero movie, the final one in the Snyderverse before the James Gunn reboot on the whole universe sort of thing. And it's looking like it'll be about $50 to $60 million domestically that it should make opening. And that's over a 4-day Christmas weekend, not necessarily just a regular weekend. I mean, for a regular weekend, $50 to $60 million would probably be pretty low for a movie of this scale. But at the same time, this is a 4-day weekend too. So, I mean, that's pretty abysmal for it. But I wouldn't necessarily rule it out just yet that it's going to be a colossal failure for the studio. I mean, in all likelihood, it probably will be a flop, but I mean, there is still some hope for fans of Aquaman and people who want to actually see this movie succeed. While the projections may not seem amazing next, note that the first Aquaman only saw an opening weekend of $67.8 million. The longer tail for the superhero fish when it came to ticket sales was in the week's play. The movie in its first 7 days cleared $137 million plus preview stateside. It's not as much that you need to focus on what it's doing on its opening weekend. This is a movie that's expected to have some long legs underneath it. So you would want to take into consideration how it's actually doing the second weekend. What is that second weekend drop going to be? Ultimately, Aquaman became the highest grossing Warner Brothers DC movie of all time at $1.1 billion worldwide. And I got the numbers pulled up so you can see $1.1 billion globally that it made during its entire theatrical run, and made around $68 million domestically during its opening weekend. So for Aquaman 2, if it's projected to make around $50 to $60 million domestically during its opening weekend, it's almost pacing just to do a little bit behind this on a high note, which isn't necessarily bad in and of itself if it does have the same word of mouth that the first Aquaman movie did. But I still don't expect it to make $1.1 billion. I mean, I don't think anyone expected to make that much, but the idea, could it make enough money to break even? I don't think that's necessarily out of the question. It's just not looking too good. Like personally, if I was betting on it, I wouldn't bet on it to actually make its money back, because you can see here, this article, it made around, or it spent around $200 million before they did a lot of reshoots, or at least $200 million was the budget of it. Now, I don't know necessarily if that was factoring in budgeting for reshoots, because it is pretty common for movies these days. But in all likelihood, they probably spent closer to $250 million on this movie. And when you factor in marketing and everything like that, this movie probably needs to make, on a conservative estimate, maybe like $500 to $600 million globally in order to break even. Now, if it's pacing just behind the first movie, and the first movie made over $1 billion, then sure, if it has the same weight with the audiences that the first movie did, then I can see this actually making its money back. But I don't expect that much, because 2018, when the first Aquaman movie came out, was a different time for superhero movies as a whole. Like, people were still really very much interested in the genre. And now that's kind of faded away. And this last year we saw with The Flash, I mean, which this movie's actually pacing to kind of open up similar to. I mean, The Flash made $55 million domestically during its opening weekend, and then just completely fell off a cliff, making less than $270 million globally during its entire theatrical run, which really wasn't even its production budget, all things considered. Now, one thing working against The Flash that necessarily Aquaman doesn't have in a complete apples to apples comparison sort of way is a lot of people were off put by Ezra Miller being the star of it because of the criminal allegations surrounding him. It was so bad, the studio was basically trying to hide his involvement in the movie in the lead up to it, and more or less trying to promote the movie as a Michael Keaton Batman movie, which is kind of ridiculous. And we saw that really didn't work, and people just didn't want to see a movie because Ezra Miller's in it. Now, Jason Mamoa doesn't necessarily carry the same animosity within the fan base as Ezra Miller, but Amber Heard is still very much in Aquaman 2. And even though the studio has tried to downplay her involvement, even going so far as to cut her out of the last trailer entirely, she's still very much in the movie. And there are people who won't watch the movie with a domestic abuser in the role. So yeah, I mean, there's still going to be that. But like I said, I don't think it's going to necessarily carry the same way. I do expect Aquaman 2 to make more money than The Flash did, but I don't think it's going to make its budget back. I'm predicting probably around or less than $400 million that it's going to bring in globally. And then that's pretty much it for the whole Snyderverse. And then James Gunn's reboot is going to be coming up next year. And I mean, I think that's also a big factor too, why this movie's probably not going to succeed. It's a superhero movie built off of a shared universe, and the shared universe is going to be rebooted. Jason Mamoa already said that he's going to be taking on a different role in James Gunn's universe. So that is pretty much that. And no one wants to watch a superhero universe movie when the universe is pretty much ending now, unless it's like a big finale. But no, it's looking like the whole DCEU just didn't really get off the ground from the get-go, and that's why they're trying to do something different. And well, we'll just see if they can actually make some money back. But I think the executives over at Warner Brothers are just hoping that the losses aren't going to be as bad as what they could be.